I've said it before around Yom Kippur, and I will say it again. People are people-y. This is my frequent refrain. I mean, you can probably make this my epitaph. I return to this mantra so often. As is the privilege of my vocation, I regularly hear such questions expressed in anguish as, why can't she act right? Why is he acting so entitled? My friend did the most generous thing. My mother did the most horrible thing. My brother is being egregiously selfish again. This institution I love is now disappointing me, and I have lost trust. People contain multitudes. People struggle to function in one arena of their lives and then are very dependable in another. People are endlessly impressive and endlessly disappointing. They are a lot of things. Mostly, they are people-y. And you are people. There is a slothful part of you that is wondering if the professional part of you is up to the task, always waiting for someone to discover your deep down lazy parts. There is a part of you that has fallen short of your expectations of yourself. A part of you that always seems to say the wrong thing in the face of someone's suffering. There was a time when you were very selfish in a relationship and you did not consider the other person nearly enough. Maybe you were addicted to alcohol or the internet or other behaviors. Maybe you were just checked out. You were too angry at your kids, and you over-relied on fear to control the chaos of young children. Your work was stressful, and since you spent your days keeping your stress hidden all day to convey confidence, you would come home and lose your temper far too often. You were a distant lover because you never felt all that confident. You are confused because despite all your efforts, you are alienated from someone you long to be close to. There is a chasm between you and you feel helpless to cross it. If only the circumstances were different. If only everyone else had behaved differently. If only you weren't such a victim of circumstance, if only. Now forgive me for quoting Taylor Swift in a very serious Yom Kippur sermon, but whenever we are trying to desperately turn the mirror outward and pass the blame like society's hot potato, more than often it's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. And if we are hard on others, if we are resentful and demanding of others, well, there is a part of us that is protecting us, protecting our precious heart from something painful, often buried deep. There is an unkind inner voice. We often save the worst and deepest blame for ourselves. Most of the time, we hope a sermon will tell a story of epiphany, of sudden breakthrough, of dramatic thunderclaps where someone's mouth hangs open and they are suddenly completely transformed, in this case by grace, forgiveness, as though that's the way change happens to any of us. More often, it is not a single story of a bolt of lightning that strikes us out of our stuckness. Instead, it is most often a series of small moments, or the fullness of relationships over time, or when new understanding is later confirmed and then later still reaffirmed. More often, when we change, it is incrementally, taking one step forward in a new direction and then 2 steps backward before finding our way again. The writer Rebecca Solnit likens the experience of personal transformation to recovering from an injury by doing physical therapy. Rather than suddenly dropping the crutches like Tiny Tim because of a miracle, no, true change, lasting change, is more like building up stamina through exertion. It's more like learning a new language. It's more like the long recovery from a deep wound. Tomorrow won't be drastically different than today, but maybe next year will be profoundly different than this year. Often, it is only by taking in the long view that you can even see change at all. And the short-term view feeds into our narrative of failure and our misconception of stasis. See, this act of self-forgiveness that I speak of may never happen with the boom of a wake-up call, but perhaps you will one day notice yourself a little softer with yourself, a little less irritable with others, maybe a little more at ease with yourself and the people around you, maybe even able to laugh at yourself a little bit. We often speak about forgiveness as something we offer to each other, like a neat transaction, something earned and then something received. But in the Jewish tradition, an accounting of the soul is required to look deep within and get real about what you have done to someone or how your actions have impacted them and caused them pain. This transformation of the spirit called teshuvah or atonement cannot be rushed, I'm afraid. It needs space, care. It needs slowness to be done properly. And the time to do it, the time to do it is always now. We have been in the midst of the days of awe, the time when Jewish people consider the harm they have caused that year before, repenting, and then returning to their lives with new resolve to do things differently. The weight of guilt may be as heavy as a stone lodged in the bottom of our gut, and we can carry it around until the rest of us might begin to harden and become brittle, and then the stone creates an outer shell, hardening us to the small disappointments and the flaws of others. I mean, why can't everyone just be better than they are? I recently spoke to a friend who had just spent a brief amount of time in jail for civil disobedience, and he reported that above all the indignities and the injustices of his jail experience, the single most dehumanizing part of jail was the overwhelming, crushing, and relentless boredom. Boredom that felt like torture. People given nothing to read, nothing to do, no purpose whatsoever, just time to stew in your actions and stay stuck in that moment forever. When he shared this with me, I think I cringed visibly because I cannot imagine a worse fate than spending your life stuck in an endless loop of your worst moment. In a recent essay, the Christian writer Nadia Bolz-Weber reflects on the theological conclusions we can draw from our prison system, where thousands of people for years upon end are seen as only what they did in their worst moments. Martin Luther once said, "It is not God but the devil who rummages through our garbage, looking for already forgiven sins to rub our noses in, to say, 'This is who you really are.'" And Unitarian Universalists can get tripped up when it comes to concepts such as sin, redemption, forgiveness, grace. People for whom concepts of sin have been weaponized against them for loving, or for believing, or for looking a certain way, are understandably suspicious of sin. It makes sense. And what you learn in a good seminary is that any theological concept can be weaponized, including forgiveness. Rabbi Danya Rutenberg writes that in the wider secular culture, and in Christian and Jewish culture, and I would add in Unitarian Universalist culture, there is often pressure on victims to forgive, even when the perpetrator hasn't done all the work, or even any work at all. Pressurized focus on forgiveness can be a very insidious way to reinscribe existing power structures. The employee should forgive the donor who sexually harassed her because that would be convenient for the leadership of the organization raising the money. The adult child should forgive the elder uncle who abused them for the sake of keeping the peace during the holidays. And this demand often comes in the form of a guilt trip, as though the perpetrator can't possibly get free until the victim offers them a blanket absolution. Now, Rabbi Rutenberg draws from the rabbinic tradition of Maimonides, a 12th century rabbi who established the movement through repentance onto repair. It is almost a formula. First, the person must own the harm perpetrated, ideally publicly. And second, do the work to become the kind of person who does not do harm again, which requires a ton of inner work. And 3, make restitution for the harm done in whatever way possible. And 4, then apologize. So the apology is like the 4th step. Then apologize for the harm caused in whatever way that will make it as right as possible with the victim. And then 5, when faced with the opportunity to cause similar harm in the future, make a better choice. It's these 5 steps from the 12th century rabbi. So forgiveness is really not that simple. It is a long and often painful process of deep reflection, but it is also pretty brave. And I am here to desentimentalize forgiveness and make forgiveness badass again. Forgiveness is an act of fidelity to an evil combating campaign. It is not really a touchy-feely type of avoidance and maintenance, because to forgive someone is to get free from their hold upon you, free from that stone that weighs you down. And as the PRISM system already knows, free people are dangerous people to the status quo. Forgiveness of others is actually something you give yourself. It is a gift to yourself. It is an internal decision for freedom. It does not mean allowing other people to walk all over you. You can forgive and enact serious boundaries. I'm going to say that again. You can forgive and you can enact serious boundaries. As my colleague Jen Crow says, it's telling someone, I love you just as you are, and I love you too much for you to let you stay that way. And how do you look in the mirror and say this? How do you practice this type of boundaried, loving kindness and forgiveness with yourself? Word replacement is a start. It is possible to change even your inner narrative through simple word replacement. When faced with the shame and embarrassment of your own missteps, and maybe worse, self-compassion is the only way out. Most people turn straight to defensiveness, to trying to desperately justify themselves or point the blame outward. But what if we had the strength of spirit and the strength of self-love to hold ourselves with tenderness, maybe even a little humor in our terrible mistakes, the way we regard someone else who we love when they do something awful. That same tenderness, but turned upon ourselves. And it doesn't mean we let ourselves off the hook. Self-forgiveness without a commitment to renewal and personal growth is really just a form of self-obsession, another form of narcissism. This means we believe in ourselves so much that we believe we can be better. This is a definition of faith. To look yourself squarely in the eye, to know that you love yourself just as you are, and you love yourself too much to let you stay that way. And I know I'm saying this as though it's a sudden epiphany, like a complete transformation, but there's no Marvel superhero for this feat of strength. Perhaps you know someone in your life who demonstrates self-compassion and self-love without arrogance, but is also someone who is always working on themselves. It's an inner wisdom that defies age and experience, gender and vocation. When we are caught in an unkindness loop, we preference one terrible part of ourselves, not allowing the other selves that are always with us to thrive or to be acknowledged or cultivated. But the goal is to see yourself as a whole person, wholeness. Not allowing the parts of us ready to grow and change to be cut off or let off the hook in our self-talk. If you believe you are beyond repair, well, then I guess you don't have to find the courage to do a great thing. So self-forgiveness is truly the bravest act. Self-forgiveness and holding yourself accountable at the same time. It is attention to hold yourself accountable. Because the loudest voice is still the one in our own heads. And this is where honoring our different parts of ourselves can lead us, strangely, back to wholeness. Psychologist Richard Schwartz contends that all of us are born with many subminds or parts. Maybe you've heard of internal family systems theory. So subminds or parts, he writes, if you can honor and communicate with your different parts, the ego, the inner critic, the saboteur, making these often maligned parts into powerful allies, understanding why our parts can become distorted or stuck in childhood traumas or cultural beliefs, honoring each part of yourself, even the destructive parts. You connect with the capital S, self. You discover your wise, your compassionate essence of goodness that is the source of healing and harmony. And when we learn to love all our parts, we can learn to love all people. And that will contribute to the healing of the world. This is the path toward peace in the heart. It starts with peace with who you are and who you are working on becoming. Both of those at once. Because you are doing the work of self-renewal. Being honest is the only thing about life. Being honest, the only thing about life you can actually control is your own response to it. The only thing about the world that is actually in your control is your response to it. But you could model this high level of healing and harmony, of self-work for others. What if you comfort with your flaws and your commitment to transform were something you could share readily and live more openly? Could you be at peace then? Knowing that people are peoply, thank you. Could you create more peace between your family and your friends? Could they use their influence to create more peace with their family and their friends, with their community, with the city? If more of us were focused on the soul work of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and holding ourselves accountable, where could that take us? Could we center our empathy with those who are the most vulnerable, under greatest attack? Could we extend this peace from our hearts outward into the city, into the state, into the nation, into the world? May this be a season of tenderly forgiving the parts of you that have acted badly. May this be a time of reckoning with the harm you have caused yourself. May you reshape your inner monologue, replacing words of derision with words of forgiveness and compassion. May you mean it when you say, I love myself. There's a reason we say that each and every week, like a mantra, like a prayer. Last evening ended Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the day of at-one-ment. May we all be blessed with deep moments of connection, divine inspiration, and may we feel safely held by community, which contains accountability. May we be safely held by community. May we all experience sweet moments of at-oneness with each other, with people who are struggling everywhere, with God, with the universe, with mystery, with the sacred. May we know peace. Amen.